Welcome to this series of component seminars. This series covers the stripping and rebuilding of individual components. Today we're going to cover the pre- and early post-war fuel delivery systems. And let's start by looking at the tools we're going to use. Going to need a set of sockets, a couple of ratchets, an 1132 wrench for our 2BAs, a 3/8 wrench for the nut on the bottom of the auto vac, and a 5/16, depending on what size there is. We're going to need a large screwdriver for the screws around the SU fuel pump bodies, a smaller screwdriver for the screws on the top of the auto vac, and a miniature screwdriver for the screws inside the electrical connection on the fuel pumps. We're going to need a couple of jumper cables to test the fuel pumps when we're finished, and a battery to give us the power to do that test. Let's begin by stripping the fuel pumps. The first step in stripping down the fuel pumps is to remove the tape, remove the nut and the cap, and we'll do that now. Got the tapes, undo the 2BA brass nut. And expose our condenser and our points. So the thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the pump housing from the body. When you get all the screws out, you may need to just give a tap to the edge of the body to make it break away. We've now got the body off and it exposes the electrical side of the pump. And what we're going to do is we're going to take the points out, and I'll show you those. So we'd remove the small screw, or loosen the small screw I should say, and that'll allow us to take the point blade out. You can see the points at the end of the screwdriver. You can see that they're quite badly burnt, and we're going to take the condenser off now. Just slide that out of the way. So we're now going to remove the other half of the points and the diaphragm. We need to remove the diaphragm to get the points out, so we can do that first. We're going to have to pull the diaphragm away from the body. Get the last screw out of the way. We need to pull it off. It sticks onto the body, and inside there's some expanders or spacers to keep the diaphragm in good shape, and we're going to let those out. When you get a new diaphragm, you're going to get different ones anyway, and you're going to have to make a decision whether you want to use the brass or the new plastic ones. So we just unscrew the diaphragm from the points. Inside there's going to be a spring, like so. Take that out. We have to lift off this plastic bridge enough to get the points out. We also have to release the ground strap. So what we're going to do is we'll take this screw right out. That takes our ground strap and our bracket for the condenser out of the way. We'll take this screw, loosen this screw off. We don't really need to take it all the way out. And then we're going to take our pin out the back here. We're going to push it out, so. Pull it all the way out. Now that'll allow us to pull the points out, like so. So now we've got the points out and the diaphragm out. And what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to clean up in here, get rid of this crud, and make sure that the surface there is nice and clean for the new points to go on. You don't need to take this off, this stud here, because what happens here, it has a lead seal with a concave nut
and there's a lead seal underneath. And if you take this off, you've got to work and work to get that off. So I recommend you just leave it like that. If you're going to paint your bodies, you can tape all this off, clean this, and then paint it. So you don't need to take that off, and I wouldn't do that unless this was cracked, and then you'd replace it. But otherwise, I'd just leave it on. That strips down the electrical part of the body, and we're going to repeat that process on the other side and get it to that stage, and we'll clean these up ready to be painted and ready to reassemble at a later date. So the easiest way to take the valve body apart is to hold it in the vise. So we hold it there. And we're going to take the filter caps off. Inside here there's a couple of filter screens, and these are designed so that you can take it out on the car. These go to the bottom. You can see those screens. Have to be particularly careful with those because they're really quite fragile. We just pull the bottom one out. Oops. You can see we've pulled the ring off the screen. They're very, very fragile. I'll have to replace that when we put it back in. And I'm going to turn it around, and we'll take the valve part off. This is the top of the fuel pump. And in here there's some valves that are screwed in. You can see 2 hexes down in there. We have to wind the first part of the valve out. So we'll loosen the 2 valves off. Somebody made those mighty tight. And show you the valves when they come out. There's the hex cap. We're going to tap it on the bench. So that one came out. There we go. Now inside you have the valve that's contained. These are valves. These washers are the valves. So you have a washer in the bottom of the valve body, which, as you can see, sits down with the smooth side down, and then you have the rough side up, and then you have a valve inside there. And that's all there is to those valves. And that stripped the valve body now to nothing. So now you can give this a good clean up, do whatever surface preparation you want, and it's ready to, once it's all cleaned up, it'll be ready to put back together. We'll change these fibre washers here. These tend to be a little bit of a nuisance if they're not in good shape. So you're going to, if you undertake this, you're going to need to replace those fibre washers. The other side here has a copper asbestos washer. This is a two surfaces of copper with asbestos inside, and you'll need those as well. So that's the valve body, and we'll prepare that, and then we'll show you us rebuilding it. We're now going to put the fuel pumps together. We're going to fit the points to the end of the solenoids and set up the diaphragm. To start with, we left these screws loose when we took them apart so that we can get some movement on the pedestals, and we'll slide the points through like so. I'm going to take care with this ground wire that we can get hold of it after we're in, so pull that out there. We're going to slide that under there. It's a little fiddly, a little bit of patience. Maybe we'll pull that in through with the pliers, like so. We're going to take our pin Make sure that you've cleaned your pins off well so they don't cause any sticking in the pedestal legs. We'll put that through like so. Rotate it a bit. Slide that through. You can see the pin going through the middle there. I'll turn that a bit. So we're going to pick up the ground of the point, and we're going to put the condenser on the same screw. We've got a Thackeray washer on the screw, goes through the condenser and the ground strap, like so. And just nip that up a bit. We won't make that too tight yet, because we're going to have to move the condenser around and position it. It's got to go underneath the blade screw, which is that screw there. And we keep that out of the way. And we take our blade for our points, put that in there. Just nip that up, push everything in. So, just everything we just nipped there now. And then we're going to take our new diaphragm and a spring, tip it upside down, we put the spring in like so, take the diaphragm, put it right through the middle, and we've got to look inside here, and you're going to see when that comes through, you push the shaft of the diaphragm right the way through, you can see that come through there. We've got to pick up on the center of the point to rotate it till the thread will join up. So I'm flicking it with the shaft. You can see there, I've just got hold of that piece in there. You can see that's moving, and I've got hold of the point with the diaphragm. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to wind that all the way in until that no longer clicks. You can see that that's still clicking over, as it were. And I just keep winding that in. It's still coming down. And the magnet is going up inside the coil. You can see it's still moving. See, that's still coming down. Now you can see that's not clicking over there now. So what I'm going to do is I look at the hole in the body and the hole in the diaphragm, and I take it off one. You saw that other hole come up. Still it's not doing it. Still not coming back. I'm really pushing that in now. Now you can see that's what we call rocking over. At this point, I'm going to undo it 6 holes, which is 1 full turn. And that's 1 full turn there. I've let it off. So now I'm going to nip it up. That up. This area here, you have to be careful that you get that far enough in, or that's going to interfere with the cap. When you put the cap on, you saw that went in a little more. The other thing that concerns me is that my points at this point are both on top of one another, aligned nicely. So you can see those points align with each other nicely. And now we're going to take our spacers. There's 11 spacers in each pump, and these cause the diaphragm to spread, and we're going to slide them up into that groove there. You're going to put one. You want them nice and clean. You don't want too much gunk on them or old gas or anything that might be in there, part of the old diaphragm. You want them nice and clean so they move. You don't want them causing you any sticking problems. And you might have to move the diaphragm around a bit to make them go in properly. So you've got to make sure they've gone in and they've gone flat, or they'll interfere when you join the thing to the body. And there's movement there. So that's that. So we've rebuilt that body, and we'll do this other body, and then we'll go on to our valves. We'll be putting our valves together. We're ready to build the valve body now, and we've got two valves here on the table, and you can see that one has a serrations, all little marks in it, and one's smooth. When I turn it over, you can see that this has serrations. So one side of this is smooth and one side has serrations. What you want to do is to put these valves into the valve body, into these holes here, and you want to put the smooth side down. So what we're going to do that is I'm going to balance it on the end of my small finger, tip the body up, just put it in like so, and that does that one, which is easy, but I can't tip the other one up and do it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flick it with a screwdriver until I get it the way I want it. So now in the holes both the serrations are up. You can see now that both of those valves are in there with the serrations up. And we're ready now to go on. We have two valves that are fixed in another unit. So, and what we would do with these is we just check to make sure these aren't worn. Just squeeze the clip together, like so. Lift that out. You can see the serrations are up on that. And we just look at that and make sure that this hasn't worn thin or may not seal. Got a good seat in around there. We'll put that back together. Nothing to do there. If it was worn thin, we'd change that out. But they generally last a long, long time. I want to make sure that that's all in the groove, or the valve won't move. You can see there that they're all in the groove and that the valve can move. You can actually rattle it and hear the valve moving. So we're going to drop those in like so. Just want to maybe spin them a bit. They'll drop right the way down to that other valve. That's one. And I know that this other one's going to be okay. Just spin that one a bit. Then we've got a couple of nuts that hold the valves in. They screw in like so. Let's take a socket and a ratchet. Just wind those down. Take those all the way home. What you can do is give it a bit of a rattle. You can hear that everything's free there. Now we're ready to screw the body onto the valve body, and I'm going to use a gasket. Put the gasket on first. And we're going to place that on like so. There's one thing to remember. You've got a breather there, and you don't want that to be at the top of the pump so that water will go in. You want that at the bottom of the pump. So we know that the filters are going to go up there, and that is the bottom of the pump. So we want to line up that breather hole as near to the bottom of the pump as we can. So we're going to do that there. Mount the body onto the valve and start a screw. You can work around the other side. You've got to pick up the diaphragm, you've got to pick up the gasket and the hole. So there's 2 in to start. You just work around and get them all started. Once I've got them all kind of home, I'm going to take a larger screwdriver that fit the slot better, and I'm going to pull them down. Now that one's attached, so we're going to attach the other one to the body. So I'm going to put a screw through there, keep that like so, put my gasket on there. Try and keep everything together now. So, I know this is my bottom of my valve body, so I look for my breather to make sure my vent hole, which is there, somewhat cuddling the whole unit, and start the one more screw in, and we should be okay. Should stay together. So I'm just going to work my way around now and take them all in. So that's that. There's another little trick we'll have to show you. What we need to do now is we're going to put the filters into the body, and to do that you've got to be particularly careful, because what happens is if you drop the filter in like so and then put the cap on, generally the cap catches the edge and then makes a mess of the filter. So to avoid that, what we're going to do, we're going to take a little bit of our Vaseline, and we're going to fill in the cap like so, and we're going to stick the filter into the cap. We're going to take one of our new washers, and we'll drop that in like so. You want to use a fibre washer. We want to put the filter in. You can see the filter's still in the nut, and still in the nut there. We take that all the way in. We do the same thing again. Fill that up with Vaseline. Push that in there. Take our new washer, fibre washer. We put that down in through. That holds that in place. Then we're going to tighten those home. Like so. I want to make them nice and tight, but not silly, but need new washers, because if you don't use new washers they're going to leak. Then on the top, I'm going to use these special copper asbestos type washers on the top, caps. Let's slip those on there. Put that also. One on there. So we'll tighten these two now. Pull them down nice and firm. You don't want the pumps to leak after you get them on the car. That'll do that. And we're now in a position to try the pumps, see if they work. So we'll connect to ground there, and we'll connect the live to there. If you're going to try the pumps without the end caps off, you've got to be particularly careful that the pin doesn't come out while you're testing them, or you'll have to struggle to put it back on. This pin gets very loose when it's moving. Got a good strong pump there. So we'll test this end here, making sure our pin doesn't come out. I'm happy enough with the way the pump started. It started nice and crisp, and it's got a good click. It's rocking over fine. So there, we'll put the end caps on. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to double check this end, all of these end screws now. It's had time to settle in. Make sure they're tight. Check my blade screw. And I'm looking to make sure my points are still aligned. We'll do the same on the other end. That one's got overlooked, I guess. Double check. And ready to put the cap on. You can see the condenser. You've got to get the condenser in a position that it's up on the raised part of the cap. You've got to make sure when you put the cap down that it goes home nice and firm without interfering. So if you tighten it up and it's not all the way home, you're going to have a problem. What we've got is a sealing washer there. We'll put that on there inside. Put that on there. We'll just nip that nut up, like so. Put our sealing washer on the stud. Get the condenser out of the way. Just bend it so that it's going to be up into the raised portion of the cover. I'll put the and just nip that down like so. And with the covers on, we'll just give them one more try. Make sure we're happy with them. Enough of that. So we're that's the fuel pumps completed. We're going to wrap some tape around there, put our sleeves on and put them on the car. We're going to take this autovac apart now and going to clean it up, rebuild it and put it back together. So the first thing we're going to do is take the top off, and inside is going to be a float and a valve, and we'll sort that out. And then as we go on, we'll take the fuel delivery part of it. There's some cork washers in there that sometimes cause a problem, but we'll start with the top. So we'll take the last couple of screws out. We have to get the top free. Like I said, inside there is our float and our valve. And just explain what happens here. As the fuel fills up the chamber, the float rises and cuts the fuel off, and when the float drops, as the fuel runs out, it opens up and fuel comes back in again. This is caused by a vacuum from the inlet manifold and draws the fuel from the gas tank. Quite simple and normally quite trouble-free, but they have been known to cause people problems, and we'll go through the process of rebuilding so that you get a good understanding. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take the valve off. This is what controls the reserve and turning on and off of the fuel. I'll show you as we go through. What's in this is a Thackeray washer that keeps it tight. There was a split pin in the nut. We pull that off from there. And we push that out. And you can see all of the holes that direct the fuel through the different modes, be it reserve or switching it on or off. So I'll turn that up and I'll show you the cork washer in here. This one's very much stuck and intact. One of the things is when you change them, you'll find a couple of little pins that support the washer, and it's actually down there, the thing that supports the washer. You have to make sure you get the washer in, but we'll go through that once it's all cleaned up and ready to put back together. And that's pretty well all we're going to do. We can remove this plug and can get that nickeled. That allows you to drain the thing. And then of course we're going to get this chamber. We don't want to bend the edge too much, so we'll work our way around the cork washer. There we go. And you can see there's a valve on the bottom there, which is all nice and free. So nothing much to worry about there. So there's the autovac. You can see inside there's a fair amount of muck that's accumulated in there, and we'll need to clean that out before we put it all back together. And that's the strip down of the autovac. We're going to put the autovac back together now. The first thing we're going to check is that our check valve is nice and free, and we can see that that opens and closes nicely, so we're happy enough with that. We're going to make sure that the float is in good shape and that there's no holes or anything in that. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to put our air valve in here. We took all this apart for cleaning and for painting, so the valves are out. This suction valve we're going to put in there, and it has to be joined to this pendulum and the air valve. So we're going to take a couple of bifurcated rivets. I'm going to run them through. So we're not going to make any of this too tight. We're going to keep this all nice and free so it floats, because if you make any of it too tight, it's not going to work. We picked up both of those. We're just going to spread those a little bit. One. Again, we're not trying to rivet them to make them tight, just to so they don't fall out. And you can see that all of that moves nice and free. It's very important that this all floats. So we put the spring in the hole on the yoke. Now we're going to draw in the wire clip up here, with again with a rivet. I'm going to push the rivet through there. Get our spring. We're pulling against the spring now. So we're going to put the rivet through the wire clip and try and get it through the two holes of the yoke. It's all a little tricky. Seem to have got it through now. We need to spread that rivet. Well, just to demonstrate, you can see the flick up there of the mechanism which shuts the fuel off once the float comes up. You can see how that, as the float drops, the mechanism opens the two, the vacuum and the fuel, and as it closes there. So we're going to spread the legs of the bifurcated rivet just enough, again, not to jam up the rivet arrangement. And once again, you can see the flick up of the two valves. When I do that, I'm going to turn it around so you can see the valves actually move. and that's the action to switch off the fuel when the autovac's full. So we're now ready to put the valve together on the top inside the vacuum feed for the autovac. There's a spring and a valve which slides in. That needs to be free, and there's a clip in there. We'll slip the clip back in like so. Then we've got the cap with a gasket. We'll put that on there. On the top of our autovac you can see petrol and suction and air. The air is for the vent so that it can vent, and this is the suction, so the suction we'll put in like so. This is the petrol feed from the tank, put that in there. And now two pieces for the air hole. We've got a union. Then we've got the valve. And that's that. We've also got the hold-in piece here. We'll put a nut and a washer on there. That completes the top. Now we'll go to the canister. Now, canister's been cleaned out and painted, and it's just a giant tank, really, like a thing. There is a union on the bottom for reserve and for switching the fuel off from inside the car. There's a slot that lines up with there. And one of the problems with these things is these gaskets become loose. And when these gaskets become loose, they move. And when they move, they cut your fuel off when you don't really want them to. So you need to put in a nice fresh gasket that's very tight in there. Also, you can see in there that there's a cutout. And that cutout there stops the gasket from moving. It's very important that you pick up the cutout so that the gasket stays in place, because if the gasket moves, then it cuts the fuel off. And we'll put that in like so. Push that all the way down. And we can then check, see all the holes line up. The gaskets come in different sizes, and they're lettered A, B, C, D, and E. Just making it go through the tight hole. Obviously, you want it to be tight, or it's just the cork that's tight. See there, and that comes through there. Paint and some stuff. We're going to pull that in. That all helps to keep the cork in nice and tight. And we'll put a Thackeray washer on there, and then we'll put our nut on. Do that before we finish up. Now we're going to put in the float chamber there. So we're going to put the gasket on first. Again, we've got a line-up hole. And we've got the same series of holes. You need to just take that around. You can see that lined up there nicely. So we'll put the second gasket on, which goes in between the float chamber and the top. We'll line up our hole, bring that around to there. So we can take our screws, put the spring washer on each one. So we'll tighten the screws. I've got them all started, so we'll tighten the screws in a crisscross manner. Go to this one first, and I'll go over here. Go over to this one. And I'll go over to this one over here. Once I'm sure they're all nicely snugged down and pulled evenly and the gasket's good, I'm going to go to the bottom. I'm going to tip it upside down. I'm not going to tighten this nut up here for these two for obvious reasons, because I don't know my position of my pipes, where the vacuum pipe and the petrol pipe come in from. So I'm just going to leave those loose. I'll put a nut on there loosely just to keep everything in place. But there's no point in tightening them up till it's on the car. I'm now going to put the Thackeray washer on there. The Thackeray washer, as you can see, is an exaggerated spring washer. And what that does is it allows to keep pressure against the gasket without jamming everything up. All the time this is putting pressure against our gasket here. And this arm goes through the firewall, or this shaft goes through the firewall, and an arm is joined on there, and that allows you to turn off the fuel from inside the car or put it on reserve or whatever. So that's what that's for. So we'll tighten this up. We'll probably give that a little bit of a tap in, like so, just to be sure that's home. And we'll split pin that up, and we've got our drain plug for the thing there. And that sets us up for the autovac. So the autovac's now ready to mount on the firewall and finish off that final pieces.
Today we're going to cover the pre- and early post-war bijou delivery systems. These are the tools we're going to need. Going to need a soft hammer and a punch to push the pin and the screw that holds the actuating lever. We're going to need a 5/16 and an 11/32 wrench for the 2BA nuts. We're going to need several combination wrenches to remove the nuts. We're going to need a C-wrench for inside the pre-war bijou pump. We're going to need some open-ended wrenches for the larger nuts on the pre-war pump. And we're going to need a side cutters to take the split pin out of the pre-war pump, and a screwdriver to take the screw on the actuating lever of the early post-war pump. Now we've seen the tools, let's go and strip the early post-war pump down. With the bijou pump, we're first going to take the cap off and take the pedal out, and then we're going to take the piston arrangement out of it. It's a pretty straightforward job, but take the nut off the screw that supports the pedal, and that allows us to take the cover off. And you can see that I've got the pedal mounted in the vise, and I did that so that, I'll show you, I can push on that there. That's going to hopefully relieve some of the spring pressure that's pulling on there. So now we're going to just tap the screw out. You can pull it out that way. There's a spring in here that you don't want to have go flying across the shop. So we're going to let that out. And we pull that off the activating lever. Take that out of the vise. Move around. Now we're going to take this end cap off. So, managed to
done in there. There's a screen and a felt in there, which we'll show you shortly. We might have to take the fitting out of the bottom, but in the meantime, we'll take the lever piece out. Just tap that out a bit. There you can see the leather washer and the valve. This is what cuts or closes the oil off from the system. And if this lever has pressure on it, if it's up against a bracket underneath the dash or isn't allowed to fully return, this valve doesn't close, and that's sometimes what causes the oil leaks underneath many of these cars. It's very important to be sure that when you put this back in, that the lever can go all the way back and thus closing that valve. That's pretty well all that there is to that. There is no nothing else in the reservoir. As far as the reservoir is concerned, we're now ready to clean it up and paint it before we put it back together. And I'm going to take this valve apart and show you that. I just put a punch inside there and gave that a twist around. And if we needed to change this leather cup washer, we'd wind this off here. You can see there's a support washer there, and that's where the leather washer would come off if we felt it needed to be changed. This one is actually in pretty good shape, but after it's all cleaned up, we'll make our decision as to whether we're going to change that. So we'll put that aside. The end cap, we've got a couple of things in here. This area here is where this seal arrangement happens, like so, and this seal at this point is important to be in good shape, and we'll probably change that one out because it's well pushed down. And there's a cover there, and inside here there's a screen, and sometimes if the oil has been dirty, you'll see that this may be blocked up. It's pretty clean, and there's the screen inside there, again just to stop any debris that might have got in there from going in the system. So this is now ready to be cleaned up, and we could send this through the cleaner and make sure everything's okay, and we'll be ready to paint that before we put it together. We've taken every part and we've cleaned it up and we've painted it, and we've got everything ready to reassemble the bijou pump. The procedure is fairly straightforward. One of the things you need to concern yourself is the leather seals in the pump, and making sure that they are in good shape, and either replace them or carry on with the same ones. What we've got here is we've got a seal, and this stops the bijou pump from leaking all over the floor. If we wanted to change it, we would dig this out and cut out a small piece of leather from a end of a hide, the nice thick area, and just push it back in there. This particular seal is nicely shaped up, and it's causing a good seal up against there. So I think we're just going to leave this in this car. We've got this seal that pushes the oil down into the system, and this is in nice shape. Again, if we wanted to change that, we would take this washer off, slip the seal out of there, and that's the seal. You can see the shape. It's a bit like a tyre pump. And what we do is we get, again, a piece of leather. We've machined out a piece, and we shape that down, and we just push it down. We make those ourselves. But we're not worried about that. It's in good shape. Put that back together. And then we put it onto the spring. we screw this into the spring there. I'll just make mention of this ball. This ball here is what seals to push the oil down into the system. So that needs to, you need to make sure that that's free so that when you press the pedal, the oil can get in front of the seal. And we'll put that on there like so. Okay, we're going to put the spring and the plunger assembly into the tank. So we'll offer that in like so. Have to get it through the small hole at the top, and then that will go all the way up. We're going to put the arm into the vise, or the foot pedal into the vise, and then we're going to join that onto the tank at this stage. Put that in nice and firm. We're going to take our shaft that holds it onto the pedal, and you can see that's got two flat edges, so that you can recognize that. So we'll put that, we'll rotate the plunger assembly, get that through, put that into the hole like so, turn that back to right angles to the tank. We're going to put the tank and the assembly up like so, then we're going to rotate it a little bit. You can see that that shaft is now in there. We're going to take our screw, and the screw can only go in one way because we have a big hole there. I'm going to make sure this goes in, and then we're going to remove it again to put the spring on. Now what we've got to do is we've got to put our spring in, our small return spring. And this is the trick of the job, because we have to get this in and then get the leg to come back over. There's a small notch or a pin sticking out there. So we'll bring that down like so. And we offer that in there. Now, you don't want to get too, you don't want to get it all the way in, because it doesn't give you any movement. And now we have to pull the leg of that spring up into this notch here. So you're going to leave at the end of the spring up, and you're going to bring it up over the pedal like so, and you're going to drop it in that groove. You can see that's in the groove. Then we're going to wind the screw right through. It gives you a little bit more movement through this side to the hole. And that's shouldered there. And we take a spring washer and our nut. We're just going to put that on loose, because the cover goes on there, and the nut and washer holds the cover on. I'll just demonstrate that at this point, although you won't be able to leave that on. So then the cover goes on like so. And that does that part of it. I'll just slip that off for now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to tip it upside down, just to ease of showing it. And we're going to assemble the bottom. So we'll take the opportunity to put the bottom retaining bolt through the bracket so we don't forget it. And we're going to take that and put that on there out of the way. So we're going to check our fibre washers. They're in good shape there and there. And our sealing piece goes on there. It says quite clearly felt to this side, so we put the felt in. And then our screen. Then we'll take this and we'll slip it all together. I did that to demonstrate, but really this all actually goes in here, like so. And the tightening up does that. So I'm going to pull a little bit on this tank to show you what happens. You're going to see this disappear in a little bit. You see that drops down as you press the pedal. So we'll do that. We'll start our cap on. We just tighten that down. That's the bijou pump there assembled. As I showed you earlier, I've left the cap off. When this joins to the firewall, there's a rubber gasket that has to be on there, and we'll put that on, and then you would bolt it. There's a T at the bottom for the bijou pipes, which is you would screw in when it's on the firewall so that you knew it was lined up to your two pipes. And that's the bijou pump for the post-war cars. We're going to disassemble the oil pump for the pre-war cars now, and due to the complexity of the job and the size of the spring contained within the pump, you need to make sure that you've got a press available to put the pump back together and to assist you in letting it go. If you don't have a press, you need to consider carefully whether or not you're going to get involved with this job. You're going to need a hydraulic press for assembling the pump, and you're going to need to take a great deal of care when disassembling the pump. First thing we're going to do is undo the 4 nuts and separate the 2 halves of the pump. And that reveals the washer. Looks in pretty good shape. You can see there's a fair amount of muck and stuff in the bottom, so we'll be able to clean that out. And we're going to take the bottom off this that should reveal the felt. Got a spacer. And there's our felt. So we'll remove the washer. The screen is on the inside, and we need to remove the actuating lever from the top so that we can get it plated. We're going to remove the cotter pin or split pin at this point here. I'll tap this pin out. A little on the tight side. So, we're going to remove the clip that locks the nut at the bottom. Like so. I'm going to put this back in the vise. Then I'm going to undo the nut. That releases the spring. The end of the spring. Pull the washer. I'm going to pull that out of there just to show you what's in there. So we have the washer support and the washer, which live down inside the filter, and they go on top of the spring. So that's the arrangement you have, like so. This in turn goes up inside there and keeps the whole thing together. Now, with that pressure removed, we should be able to take off the arm out. So now we can get that finished. And we pull the actuating rod out. So we're ready to clean this up, repaint it, nickel the cap and the fittings, and put it together.
We're going to assemble the pre-war pump now, and as I mentioned before, due to the complexity of the job, we're going to use the press. We're going to check the cup washers in the pump, and we're going to check that the valve's moving. So we'll take this around, and just pushing that there shows that the valve is actually moving. You can see that open and close, so we know that's okay. We're checking the condition of our cup washers. Again, if we needed to, we'd take a piece of leather and make a press to make the size. If we needed to change them, we'd take this castle nut off here and slide on 2 new washers. These are actually in very good shape, and there's really no point in changing them, so we'll leave them in. We're going to put them back on our shaft, like so. You can see this small vent here. This is a locking device. When we get the brass piece into the steel tube, we're just going to punch that back in so that it can't come off. I'm sure it won't come off anyway, but we'll do what they did originally. Just use a screwdriver to hold it. Like so. We can see that's good and flat. We're just going to take a punch there and give that a smack with the hammer. And that's just enough to stop that from coming out. We're now going to push the valve into the body of the unit, and I'm going to put a bit of Vaseline on there to ease the leather seals or cup washers into the bottom of the chamber. Be pretty generous. We don't want to pick up or roll the thing in. You can see the bottom of the reservoir, and we're going to drop the valve and the washers in. We'll rotate it around. You can see that's actually dropping in there now. With our screwdriver, we're going to take it and we're going to position it for the pump leg. So we've got that at the angle towards the firewall. And now we're going to put the spring and the screen and the top on, and then we're going to put it into our press. So we take the spring and our screen. There is a washer in there you'll need to look at. There's a washer there, and then there's a leather seal or washer in the top of the screen. Let's see if I can get it out so that you know the order that they should be on. So you've got the washer, you've got the leather, then the screen, and now we're going to have to push all this down and put the top of the reservoir on. So we're going to put this into our press now. Once you have it mounted in the press and the spring's somewhat compressed and the whole thing is lined up, you need to check inside here to make sure that the washer at the top of the screen is lined up also. And then you can start to put some pressure onto the spring with the press. Take it down carefully and continue to check inside and make sure that the hole is still lined up. Continue on with that until you get down to the point that these studs are ready to align themselves with the holes, and we'll check for that. You need to check all the time. You need to make sure that nothing's moved. You've got that great deal of pressure from the spring, and you need to look up inside for these studs and also in there. We're beginning to come through now with the center of our shaft. We're doing well there. So now I'm going to concentrate on making sure that the studs are going to come into the holes. And what I'm doing is I'm wiggling and making sure that they haven't picked up. Once you've got all 4 studs started in their holes, you can continue to bring the top of the reservoir down. We're hoping to see the studs appear very soon. You still need to give it some wiggles and some twists to make sure everything's staying in line. The shafts come through. We'll expect to see the slot for the pedal any minute. And without putting a great deal of pressure, you can see these studs have now come up here. So what we're going to do is put aluminum washers on each one of these studs and put the retaining nuts on. And that, along with the pedal, we'll put the pedal in, is what contains that big heavy spring. It doesn't seem like a great deal, but obviously works. So we'll put the 4 aluminum washers on the top of the studs of the reservoir. We'll fit our nuts. And before we nip them up, we're going to put the leg or the pump, the foot-operated lever for the pump in with the clevis pin. So we'll put the foot lever pump in, like so, pick up our slot. Okay, so we felt that click in. So we'll put our clevis pin in now. Wiggle it around a bit till we get it lined up. Gently push that all the way in. Take a rubber hammer so as not to mark the plating. And that's all the way in. So we'll nip up our nuts now at this point before we remove it from the press. But once that foot-operated lever's in there, it's not going to go anywhere. Just go around them one more time. They're only 2BA, so you're not going to pull them down like they're holding the engine in or anything, but that's that. So now we feel quite comfortable to release the press, and voila. Of course, when you press on this, you've got this pipe feed here, so you need a hollow piece of aluminum to protect that so that you've got a good surface to press on, which is this surface here. To complete the process, we're going to fit the cap to the top, put a split pin in the clevis pin, and fit the bottom cap. First of all, we'll do the split pin. So we'll fit the split pin, have to make it very short to get it in. It's rather awkward, so we'll see what we can do here. Might have to take this nut off here just to get the split pin to slide past it. Okay, so we'll fit the nut back on. Have to do some touch up on our paint there. So difficult. So we'll nip that down. We've got the cap for the top. Take our masking off there.
We'll put our reservoir top on. And on the other end, so we're going to put our felt support in to the bottom of the pump. We're going to put our felt in, and we have a spacer that supports that. We're going to put our gasket inside the cap in there. We're going to slide that on, put our aluminum washer on, and then our dome cap nut. We'll just tighten that down. And then we've got our two feeds that take the oil down the firewall to the chassis. We just roll that over, put the other side feed in, feed for the left side of the car. And that completes the pump for the pre-war car. Well, that's it for this seminar. Good luck with your project, and we'll see you on the next show.
For more information on other programs in this series or upcoming technical seminars, please contact us at the number on your screen.